You're listening to the Rite Retirement Show.
The 70% of people out there listening to the show today are going to need some level of care. It doesn't necessarily mean that 70% are going to end up in a nursing home, but 70% of people will need some assistance out there.
The biggest fear is running out of money for the retiree, but what we see is not enough people spend enough of their money.
Cris prides himself in what matters to you. This is the Rite Retirement Show.
Hi, I'm Luann Fulmer, and welcome to the Rite Retirement Show. Today with certified financial planner and financial advisor Graham Bauer of WG Financial Group. Graham is also an enrolled agent at the firm, and he's here again today to give us some helpful advice about retirement planning. So here's our phone number as we get started. This is how you can reach out to the team complimentary. 256-937-2010. You may call that number, or if you prefer texting, text the word visit to 256-937-2010. Again, it's a complimentary visit. Remember to check us out on Facebook throughout the week. WG Financial Group 256 will get you there. And anything that happens throughout the week, Cris will update any news headlines. And it's always something that you can, stay in touch with WG Financial Group on Facebook. Remember, the motto here is plan, retire, and play. That is what we want for you and desire for you. Find us online at WGFinancialGroup.com. And this show is also available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Just search for the name of our show, The Rite Retirement Show. Graham, so excited to be here with you.
Yeah, it's great to be back, Luann. I know we've been all over the place. You were traveling, right? Weren't you
I
in
went to
Mexico or something?
Well, I didn't go to Mexico. I went to see family in Grand Rapids.
Oh, not quite Mexico.
Not quite Mexico. They're not there right now.
Yeah, no, a little bit different. Still some water there, right?
There's
Is that
water.
Close to Lake Michigan?
Yeah, Lake Michigan is really fun, and it looks like an ocean. Just no salt water. Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, well, it's good to be back because it's been a couple weeks. I know Cris is absent today again. He should be back here next week or so. I'll say and this probably is getting in even a little bit into our Fed Minute, but we've just had so many federal employees here recently as today as we're recording September 30th, this is the day for the people who took the first, deferred retirement, the first DRP. So it's been a huge surge. So it's been a busy time, and we've had to open up some spots that have gotten in the way of radio. But we're trying to get back to get some new content because someone came in the office, I think it was last week, and was like, "Hey, there's no new show up on Spotify the last 2 weeks." And they're like, "Shoot, we gotta get back on top of it."
They're paying attention, Graham.
Yeah. I guess that's good.
Yeah, that's good. That is good. All right, well, we're going to get to that federal minute in a second. Let's first of all start, though, with the market. Tell us about what's going on with the market.
Yeah, so the markets, continued to be pretty good here this year. I can't remember. I think we've recorded since the last jobs report and inflation report came out. Neither of those reports were very good. The inflation report was a bit higher than you would want to see. The jobs report was definitely a bit worse. And then there was a revision to a previous jobs report that, revised it down by close to 900,000 jobs or something like that. So, all that kind of culminated in this rate cut that we saw, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago.
Last week.
So first rate cut since last year. Obviously, people probably thought we were going to get more sooner. I think now everything is going to kind of be looking at what's going to happen with the next rate cut. So interestingly enough, and again, I guess everything's tying back to the federal minute. We'll talk about this in a sec too. But with a government shutdown kind of looming tonight, I think we recorded these on Tuesday.
Yes.
So it's September 30th right now. And tonight, if they don't come to an agreement, there's going to be a government shutdown, not something we're not used to. This seems to happen basically every year. But if that happens, we're not going to get a jobs report on Friday. So I think Friday is when they were supposed to be the next one. But with the shutdown, they only keep certain things open. Social Security still pays out veterans benefits, law enforcement, all the essentials, but jobs reports will not be coming out. So we'll have to see about that. That might be a little bit delayed. So that'll be kind of an indication. But as of right now, it looks like it's very probable that we see another 25 basis point cut here in October. So late October,
wow,
there's going to
really?
be another meeting. Right now, we're at like about a 96% chance on the
Okay.
futures.
Oh, good
So-
to know. Okay.
But I think, the jobs report's going to tie a lot into that. I think there probably is going to be a cut because the only thing that seems like would really stop it at this point is if the jobs report was just incredible and it was like, wow, 0% unemployment, everything's great, which has been pretty unlikely in my opinion.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, pretty unlikely. But that's the bigger target. So even with inflation ticking up, the futures are still saying pretty high to see another rate cut, in large part just because these jobs reports have been a little bit worse than the Fed would like, and they've been pretty open about prioritizing jobs. Like that is, they're kind of a two main goals most of the time, and that's maximum employment and keeping inflation around their 2% target. And right now it seems like there's really a 1A and a 1B goal. And the 1A is maximum employment and the 1B is inflation. So we'll see with that. But, as these cuts keep coming in, that is good for the markets. You've seen them tick up. The market, it loves these rate cuts at the moment. A lot of it, is already kind of priced in, as we like to say. So if there is a cut in 30 days from now, I wouldn't expect to see a huge surge because of that cut. Probably a lot of the upward movement we've continued to see is because of the likelihood that happens. So that's kind of the market update. Not really anything too crazy. It's continued to be a good year. Chris's end of year prediction is looking a whole lot better than mine at this point. And I'm okay. I'm okay.
And why
to admit
is that?
when I'm wrong.
So, give us the difference between the two of yours.
I don't remember his exactly, but we both guessed positive, but I guessed, low single digits positive and he guessed high single digits. And I think we're at like 13% year to date right now. So, anything can happen. To be fair, I think we made our predictions way back during the tariff time in April. So it was a pretty different environment, but not making excuses. I guess I am making excuses, actually.
It's okay. You can make excuses.
Yeah, well, it's what I always tell people. They don't pay us to pick stocks. They pay us to plan retirement. So this is why I'm not in the business of picking stocks.
Exactly. Okay, so enough of the market, but now let's go to the Federal Minute and give us an update on that.
Yeah, so, again, not a whole lot new here. There's really two main things. One, like I mentioned a minute ago, today as we're recording this, it's September 30th. So the largest 1 month wave of federal employees retiring or, retiring/resigning is happening basically today. This is kind of the last end of the pay period. That second wave is going to hit end of December, but for the people who took the first one, it's ending in September here. So that's going to mean, for one, that there's going to be a lot of federal employees going into retirement for the first time. We have a ton that we work with. Like I mentioned, there's a ton that have been coming in. And, it's been kind of a scary time for a lot of them, even if they've prepared well. I mean, I know, Luann, you're getting closer to that retirement time horizon. And even if, yeah. So even just for you, like at this point, the thought of if you were retiring today, that's still a scary thought.
It is a scary thought because just everything involved, not working, and then also just have I done enough and am I doing everything right? It's just, there's so much involved.
Yeah. There's a lot. And so, we encourage people not to wait until the last minute. But if you were a federal employee that is waiting until the last minute, it's certainly not too late, as you're going to be making some key decisions about your pension, about your health care, about what to do with your TSP, all those different things. So I think that's crucial to keep in mind. And the other thing revolving around kind of this shutdown that's imminent, there's been a lot of, I call them threats, I guess maybe, I don't know, I guess they kind of are threats about large, rifts, so reduction in force if a shutdown happens. So in addition to this, to this large DRP retirement that's happening this month, there's a good chance if the government shuts down, we might see a large RIF happen. So a lot more federal employees out of work. That'll either force retirements for some or, resigning, looking for a new job. So with both of these things, I guess my reminder is just if you are a federal employee and you're nervous about either of these things, it's a really good time to, have a good solid plan of what you're going to do because there's a lot of uncertainty. And, government shutdowns, we've talked about this before because we pretty much have to talk about it every single year at this point. So it always happens. They're not like as big a deal as people make them out to be, or maybe I say people, the media. It's sort of similar to, every now and then you get that headline. I forget what country it is. It's either, you might know, Luann, it's either like France or Italy or one of those European countries where when they have something similar happen about a budget proposal, they call it like a government collapse.
Oh, yeah.
And so you'll see a headline that's like France government collapse.
And that's so scary. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Collapse. Yeah.
It sounds like there was some revolution
Yes.
and, they brought the guillotine back out or something like that.
Yeah.
But that's not, not at all what it means. It just is more or less like a reorganization, I believe. Not that I know too much about their politics, but it's a similar deal. It's a scarier word, shut down.
Yeah.
But typically it gets worked out pretty quick. It doesn't tend to have a huge effect on the markets.
Mm-hmm.
But the people that, like I said, this time that it might have a bigger effect on than usual, which always has a bit of an effect, is those federal employees. So just an uncertain time for them. And like I said, ton of them cycling through the office right now, which is great. And just kind of want to, put a little call to action for anybody else who is in that situation.
Right. So I'm going to give that phone number out right now. I think that calls for it. 256-937-2010 is the way to reach out to our team at WG Financial Group. Graham, of course, Chris, the entire team can guide you. If you are a federal employee getting ready to retire or you have questions, you may call that number or text the word visit 256-937-2010. Get on their calendar. It's complimentary. Okay, anything else about the Federal Minute, or shall I move on?
No, that's all I got this week for the Federal Minute. It's been a little bit of slower news it's more news than usual, but I feel like it's been kind of the same news for a little bit. But it is still important for people to hear. But yeah, it's not as exciting as talking about, a raise for federal employees or anything like that. So.
Right. Okay, then let's move on to another topic that you said you wanted to discuss. And I'm very excited about this, and that is optimizing our 401ks.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a bit about this because I think here recently, especially as we've been now entering back into, more of a bull market, there have been a lot of people that I think have been needing to take another look at their 401k, even internally, clients, about the way they're allocated, maybe, what they want to do as far as rollovers, all those different types of things. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. And also we'll get to some changes that are coming up with 401k plans next year as well.
Yeah.
So one thing that I think is kind of a misconception about 401ks is that they are a inexpensive investment vehicle to invest in. Now, that's not necessarily untrue. It just depends on a lot of factors. So here recently, I had a client that moved and they got a new job. And they sent me over a list of the funds inside of their 401k that they could invest in. And they were like, hey, how should I allocate this? And the entire fund options were all high cost, A-share, front-loaded, so commissioned mutual funds. You don't see that very often. So I'm not going to say throw the baby out with the bathwater or anything like that. But from time to time, you'll see those examples that kind of do remind you that, just because you have this, selection of funds, some target date funds, this, that, and the other, doesn't necessarily mean they're all low cost. In addition to that, a lot of 401ks have other, administrative and sometimes even like management fees that are a little bit harder to find, and you can't totally control those as the employee. But as the employee, what you definitely can control is the funds that you're invested in inside of the account. Mm-hmm. So for a lot of people, they'll just kind of, find a S&P fund or something like that, or say, oh, this target date one, I'll throw it in here. But I do think it's really worth looking at what all of your options are and kind of going online if they don't publish it on the website and comparing what that internal expense ratio is. A study done, I think a couple of years ago on 401k plans found that the average expense ratio is like 0.5%, which in my opinion is really high for just the expense ratio because there's some very inexpensive funds out there. I mean, I've seen 401ks that, the expense ratio is less than 0.1%, which is great. That's, kind of more what you want to see. But I think it's very worth, logging into your 401k online. And if you've never done it, looking at all of the available funds, looking you're in and, saying, okay, if I'm trying to keep the same allocation, how can I do that and maybe do it a little bit more inexpensively? Sometimes you'll see an option that says like, US large cap equity alpha class A. That's going to be more expensive than the one that says, Vanguard S&P 500 index fund.
Okay.
And those are going to move very similarly. So I think it's just a good thing for people to remember that, not everything you're investing in is always inexpensive. It's worth looking at. We help people and clients, allocate their 401ks just because trying to keep those, expense ratios down can really add up over time.
Right. Yeah. So that's something that you look at when people come in, right? You take a look at what they have and you can kind of make suggestions on what else they can do.
Yeah, because that's one thing. I think people are pretty aware a lot of times. Well, they're not as aware as they should be, but they're more aware of what their expenses are for like a managed IRA. If they have an account with, a broker firm or something and they charge them whatever fee. Again, I don't think people are, know that quite as well as they probably should, but more often than not, they'll have some idea. Where, with a 401k plan, with an employer plan, a lot of times people have no idea. They've never even thought about it. And they're putting money in, they set it up, 10 years ago, and they haven't thought about it since. And similarly, on that note, I think another, I wouldn't call it a mistake, just area of efficiency is relying too heavily on some of the target date funds. And some of them are better than others. So, Luann, are you familiar with what target date fund is?
I am. Yes, I am.
Okay.
I had one, but now it's I had it up to 2025, so now I got to change that.
Yeah. So the time has come. They're a good option for simplicity's sake. So, if you are somebody who has absolutely no idea what you're doing, and you're just like, hey, I'm going to put this in the target date 2040 and 2050 and just kind of let it ride. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. But what we've seen with these a lot of times is that they become a little bit too conservative, a little bit too fast. And what I mean by that is specifically for the younger person, somebody really just think someone in their 20s through maybe early 50s that has a 10-year, 15-year time horizon to retirement. I pulled up just a prominent one. I won't say what one it is, but it's one I've seen a bunch of times. And it's a 2040 fund. So that's 15 years from now. And in that, it's 25 to 30% bonds and fixed income, which, again, not the worst thing in the world, but just want to point out that's a 15-year time horizon. So if I, ask somebody, hey, you don't need this money for 15 years. Are you okay being a little bit more aggressive with it? Usually people are going to be okay being a little bit more aggressive, and it's a little safer to be, I say safer. It's a little less risky to be aggressive with money that has a long time horizon, because over 15 years, we're going to go through, multiple full economic cycles.
Sure.
And it's not money you need tomorrow. So over time, if you're in a 2040 fund today and you truly have 15 years to retirement, 25-30% of your portfolio could be missing out on some of the growth and upside. So again, it's not like the worst option in the world. I don't think people are terrible for using it, but that's another thing where people come in, we take a look at it, say, hey, maybe how do we recreate something similar to this target date fund without giving up, some of that return as well, to say, we'll keep evaluating this, and year over year can look at changing it. If you're within 5-10 years of retirement, they're probably a little bit of a better option. It's really the further out you get when you're like truly 10, 15, 20, 25 years out, that they just tend to be a little too conservative, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So not trying to tell you necessarily to go change everything right now, Luann, because I know you're probably a little bit closer. But for the younger person, I think it's wise to look at that again.
No, that's great advice. Yeah. Good tip there. Very, very good. Anything else about optimizing, talking about rollovers?
Yeah. So as far as I can get to rollovers in a bit, but as one other thing I wanted to kind of touch on too is the 401k loan side of things.
Okay.
And this is not something that I recommend a ton to people, but I think it's a good thing to know about and understand in certain situations, because especially right now, I mean, I know rates are coming down a bit, but they are higher than they've been in a while overall. I think it's kind of good to know what some of your options are for borrowing money. So 401k loans, just for anybody who's unfamiliar, not every plan allows for it. But the general rules are you can borrow up to 50% of your balance with a cap of $50,000. So if your balance is $20,000, you can only borrow 10. If it's $500,000, you can borrow 50. This is not something I would ever recommend somebody does and goes on a vacation with the money.
Yeah, I know.
Or, does something where they're just blowing the money necessarily.
I knew somebody who used it for their house payment, and I was like, I don't think you should touch your money,
Yeah, if they're doing their monthly payment. Well, see, the risky thing, it's especially risky if you're under really 55. Because, let's say you've seen everything going on with the federal government right now, but there's a lot of other people outside in private sector that have lost jobs too. So if you're working for, a big tech company or something, and you have $200,000 in your 401k and you're going to borrow $25K to go buy a new car, well, that's great. If you get fired tomorrow and you're, 45 years old, you're going to have, depending on the plan rules, usually like 60 to 90 days to pay back that loan in full. Otherwise, it's getting taxed and hit with that 10% early withdrawal penalty.
Yeah, the penalty. That's right.
Yeah. So if you're over 55, you can avoid that with the rule of 55. But if you're under, it's a little bit riskier. So the only times I've really recommended it there, and I'll kind of give an example. For one thing, I think you got to be pretty secure in your company. Mm-hmm. So if you're someone who, in the past, I've had people who are have partial ownership of a smaller company or have worked there for 20 years. And it's like the likelihood of them getting fired is very low, or getting laid off is very low based on that. And in addition to that, they have maybe a very high interest loan. So I've seen, last year, had a client, had a pretty substantial 401k balance and had just through random expenses, things just added up and they racked up, $15,000, $20,000 of credit card debt. We took a look at the statements and there was like a 28% interest rate on that debt. So, right. 28% is crazy.
It is.
Making the minimum payments, you're not really going to be able to pay that back very fast. That's going to keep compounding on itself. Mm-hmm. So in that situation, you say, okay, been at this company a long time, pretty secure job, can probably get this paid off in a year or so just through cash flow. Maybe we can move this over to a 401k loan, take a 401k loan, pay it off, and then get that 401k loan paid off in the next 12 months. Because at that point, you're paying yourself back the interest, and it's going to be way easier to pay it back if you're not dealing with that 30% compounding interest rate coming off as well. So I think in situations like that, it's a good option to be aware of. Again, it's not right for everybody, and it is risky. And I say this again to say, I've mostly recommended it to replace other bad debt short term, not usually to, go buy a new car or, do a home renovation, even though it can be useful in those situations. It's just riskier if your time horizon is going to be longer to pay the money back. You only have, I think, 5 years tops. But even so, a lot can happen in a job in 5 years if you're under the limit. But I think that's just kind of another little tip. And then, I kind of mentioned this in the last one, but I think the rule of 55 is another good thing to be aware of with your 401k plan. Everybody's used to the 59.5 rule, where if you're over 59.5, you avoid that 10% early withdrawal penalty.
Yeah.
But if you retire after 55 from a company you're currently employed with, in the year you turn 55, you can actually withdraw prior to 59.5 from that 401k only. So that's kind of why it bypasses for the 401k loans as well, and everything like that. So I think those are all, good things to be aware of with your 401k. It's a complicated vehicle, but it's a lot of times kind of the main one that people have nowadays with their retirement. A lot of people have pretty much everything tied up in one or two 401k. So I think understanding what your options are, trying to optimize it as much as you can is really important.
Right. And the thing is, you're right. We all are told, oh, put your money in a 401k when you get your job and, hopefully they will match it and all that. But that's about it. We don't really know anything. So most of us don't. So we've got to get guidance. And that's why I'm so glad, that's what you guys are here for, to kind of guide people on all of these complicated things within the 401k. All these things you're talking about, I didn't know all of this. And I'm sure people listening are the same. So very good. Thank you for clarifying a lot of that and telling us what we can do. What about any changes coming for this next year in 401ks?
Yeah, there's really 3 big changes, and I'll try to get to all of them before the break real quick, before we get to this next segment. One thing to be aware of, so they got the extra catch up. We've had that 7,500 catch up that has been around for a while, but for people between the ages of 60 and 63, and this is starting in 2025. The catch-up raises from 7,500 to 11,250. So it brings your total 401k allowable contribution to like 34,750 pre-tax or Roth if you are between the ages of 60 and 63. So that's a good thing to take advantage of because you only have a few years to do it. A good way to defer some more income or build up some more Roth balance depending on your situation. Also, this is for next year. Starting next year, you're going to be able to, depending on your plans, you'll have to ask your plan provider, but you should be able to elect your match, so what your employer pays in, as Roth. Right now, that is not possible in 401k plans. Even if you contribute 5% Roth and that's all you do and your employer matches 3%, they're going to match that 3% pre-tax. They're not going to match it Roth today. But starting in 2026, plans should allow you to elect to have that match go in as Roth.
Ooh, that's nice. Very nice.
It's a good way to build up a little bit more of a Roth balance. Obviously people need to be aware that if they do that, it's going to be taxable. So add a little bit to your taxable income. So you'll need to see where you are income wise for the year, if that makes sense for you. But it is going to be a nice change that, probably should have been made a while ago. And I guess I can say myself personally, I guess I'll have to ask Chris next time he's on here if our workplace plan will have that. But if it will, I will definitely do that at this point to kind of help build up a little extra Roth balance.
Yeah, and a little tax cushion later in life,
Yeah, definitely.
Afterwards, yeah.
Definitely. And then the last kind of thing on changes for 2026, we talked about this a lot, actually, I think in 2023, maybe, because it was supposed to start in 2024 and they pushed it back a couple of years. But if you make more than $145,000 in wages in 2026, you're considered an HCE, highly compensated employee, and you will have to put your catch-up in as Roth. So if you're making $190,000 next year and you're maxing out your 401k and getting the catch-up, and maybe you're even getting that extra catch-up, you're going to have to put that extra catch-up in as a Roth contribution as well. So that's going to be, a little bit of a tax hit as well. Not anything crazy, but if you're, making pretty good money and you were putting $31,000 in this year, you'll only be able to get $23,500 in pre-tax. The rest will go in Roth. So you'll be building up that balance, but also paying a little bit more taxes now, which, is never fun. So you might need to be looking for other ways to defer a little bit of income as that will be going away. So with that, we're right about the end of our first segment. If you are catching this in the car on your way to church or anywhere else, you can hop over to Spotify and Apple Podcasts and look for the Rite Retirement Show to catch the second half of the show. We'll upload the full show there as well. If any of the stuff we're talking about feel like applies to you and you're a federal employee that feels like they need some extra guidance, or someone looking for help with your overall retirement strategy, give us a call at 256-937-2010. Again, that number is 256-937-2010, or you can text the word VISIT into that same number.
If lingering doubts like, have I saved enough? Or will my retirement funds endure? Are on your mind, it's time to consult with Cris Wallace. Text VISIT to 256-937-2010. That's 256-937-2010. to book your appointment and get the answers you need.
Are you a federal employee feeling pressure from the early retirement offers like VERA, VSIP, or the Deferred Resignation Program? Recent government initiatives have introduced significant changes to federal retirement programs, making employees feel pressured to consider early retirement or face potential layoffs. At WG Financial Group, we help guide federal employees through these uncertain times. Our team understands the complex federal retirement systems and can help you make informed decisions. Call 256-937-2010 to schedule your complimentary discovery session with us today. We'll help you assess your options and create a personalized retirement plan to help you feel more confident. Visit WGFinancialGroup.com or call 256-937-2010 to book your session. Firm is not affiliated with the U.S. government. Investment advisory services offered through AE Wealth Management, LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor.
Market fluctuations can be unsettling, but a resilient plan can help maintain stability. Discuss how you might fortify your retirement strategy with Cris Wallace. Text VISIT to 256-937-2010 today to begin. Remember, text VISIT to 256-937-2010.
Well, we thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Luann Fulmer, and you're listening to the Rite Retirement Show. Today with Graham Bauer, a certified financial planner, financial advisor, and enrolled agent at WG Financial Group. I do want to mention, find us online at WGFinancialGroup.com too, okay? Great things there that you can find out all about the team, the awesome people that work there, and put together plans for retirees just like you. So thank you so much for spending part of your Sunday with us. All right, I want to get to talking about our retirement income. And so many people spend decades, accumulating wealth for retirement. But the one thing that they are worried about, number one fear, will my money last as long as I do? And, we're all living longer. We have inflation eating away at our purchasing power, market volatility always threatening our retirement nest eggs. So the old rules of retirement planning may no longer be enough for us. So that's the question here. Graham, I want to start with just the foundation. Tell us what some of the biggest challenges that retirees are facing today that could make traditional retirement planning obsolete.
Yeah, as we've kind of approached this modern era, a lot of things have changed compared to how retirement looked in the 80s and the 90s and even early 2000s. I think one of the biggest changes, we've talked about this a million times, but it's important, is the decline of employers offering pension plans, those defined benefit pension plans. I've mentioned this a bunch of times, but my grandfather, he passed away, earlier this year, and he was 87 years old. And he was retired. Let's see, I think he was retired for like over 30 years, 33, 35 years, something like that.
That's a long time, yeah.
And, he always bragged that he was retired longer than he worked his previous job. He was a teacher at a high school.
Mm-hmm.
And, his pension was a big part of his retirement. I don't know exactly how much his pension was, but, for those, whatever it was, 30 plus years that he was in retirement, despite going through some difficult times in history, there was .com bubble, there's financial crisis, all those things were during his retirement. He had a solid base of it would have been a New York State teacher pension, as well as having Social Security coming in. And between those two things, that's a pretty solid base of income to live on. Again, I don't know how much it was, but, it got him through a very long time. And you just don't see a whole lot of that anymore, which, means that more stress, more focus is going on investments. And even though that might not necessarily be a bad thing for everyone, for some people, that probably means they've ended up with way more than they would have had if they had just had a pension plan.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a lot more risk in that. It's not as comfortable as just retiring at 55 years old and saying, I have a pension that'll get me through the next 7 to 10 to 12 years, and then I'll have pension and Social Security, and I'll be cruising for the rest of my life. There are those unicorns out there, but it's pretty rare at this point. So I think that's one. Longevity. I think longevity is a pretty big deal. It's getting, people are living longer and longer. I actually looked up, just out of curiosity, because we've talked about this before. Luann, what do you think the average lifespan was for a man in 1970? And I went ahead and looked for the statistics removing to like infant mortality, because that would bring these numbers way down.
So 1970, I'm going to guess in their 60s. Am I right?
So 68.
68
was the average.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
And in 2025 in the US, it's almost 80. So, it's been 50 years and we've pretty much increased our average lifespan by like 12 years.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is a pretty big deal, because I believe in 1970, the full retirement age for Social Security was 65.
Right. It was 65. Yeah. So they weren't expecting people to live for very much longer.
Exactly. Yeah. So the average person, right? 3 years.
Yeah. Oh, they'll be in the retirement for 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Where now you're talking, even if you just wait till 67, probably, if you're the average 13.
Yeah.
But, if you retire 62 and you take it, which we don't usually advise, but if you do, that could be 18 years on the system.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a big deal. Again, I mentioned my grandfather. He's 87 years old. He lived a long time. I have another grandfather that's, I believe, over 80 now too. So people in my family have a decent bit of longevity generally, and you're just seeing it more and more. Guys are so pessimistic. When I say guys, I mean just men.
Yeah.
About how long they'll live. Does Bobby do that?
Yeah,
Luann,
he is. He's like, I probably won't live for, even in my 80s. I'm like, your dad was 90 something and your mom was late 80s. You're going to live a long time unless you get hit by a truck. I always have to say that.
Yes. Yeah. There's always the crazy, stuff that can happen.
Right.
But generally, if you have longevity in your genes, we hear it all the time. I was doing a review meeting for actually a federal employee client who's retiring pretty soon, as we have a lot of these. And we were talking about, we usually run plans out to 92 and 94 years old for the male and the female, just to kind of try to account for a lot of longevity, even though, you may not live that long. You'd rather know that you could make it that long.
Right.
And he was so adamant about moving it down to 85. He was like, Graham, there is no way that I live to 90. But the crazy thing is he's already one of the lived the longest of almost anyone in his family. So I'm
my gosh, that's funny. Know. He's going to hit 100. You just watch.
Probably. Yeah. And that was, that was my grandpa too. Both of his parents died at 40, I think.
Oh my gosh. That is early.
Yeah. And his brother even passed away, I think maybe 60s.
What?
And he was pushing 90. So it's not a one size fits all, even with your genes. They definitely help, but the lifestyle you live and everything matters a lot.
Yeah.
So either way, people are living a long time. They're living longer. You imagine in 20, 30, 40 years, that lifespan's probably going to continue to increase.
It will.
Medicine increases and everything.
Mm-hmm.
What's also going to continue to increase, though, is inflation. And that's the flip. That's really the flip side of what plays into longevity, not just the fact that, that's a long time to have to, be pulling from investments. It's a long time to have to be pulling from investments while inflation kind of ticks up. So
I know. That's why we have to make sure our money grows, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm sorry I'm making you guess on so many things, Luann. But I saw this recently on social media, and I thought this was a really interesting way to kind of look at inflation. So do you remember in 1980 for a Big Mac, how much it cost just for the burger, not the whole meal?
Just a Big Mac in the 80s. Probably I'm gonna guess. Look at me guessing. I'm gonna guess $2.50, $3. Am I close?
So you're not too far off. For the whole combo, it was around $2.50 for everything in the mid 80s. But for just a burger alone in the year 1980, it fluctuated a little bit around the country, but average was 50 cents. And
in the 80s. Oh, okay.
Just for the burger alone, not for everything else with it. There's something that's kind of funny. I've seen it before. I think it's called the Big Mac Index, where it basically takes a look at the cost of a Big Mac versus wages to kind of compare inflation. It's not the most reliable thing, but it is kind of a funny thing to look at. And at the time, basically, an hour of minimum wage bought you 6.2 Big Macs, where today it's like just under one.
Yeah, barely one. Yeah,
barely one. So it's just kind of an interesting way to look at like prices have increased a lot, and that's even as minimum wages, more than doubled,
right?
Since then. So I think it's kind of an interesting way to look at how prices have increased, but we've seen a lot of inflation over the last couple of years, and in all likelihood, we will see more at different parts through retirement. So that's, another risk. If you're living longer, if things are getting more expensive, you need to kind of take that into account. And then lastly, we've talked about this again a bunch of times, but sequence of return risk, which is really, to put it very simply, the risk of your investments declining a lot in value early on into retirement while you're pulling off of them, which hasn't really been, a huge issue for people over the last couple of years. I know 2022 was a little rocky, but overall, really the last 5 years, we've only had one truly negative year. So that hasn't been a huge deal for the retirees in the last few years. But if you look historically, that has been, a much bigger risk for people in some of the more tumultuous times of the early 2000s, the late 2000s and everything. So I think that's something to be thinking about with all of those things kind of paired together, which again, we don't ever say these things to like scare people out of retirement or anything. Just things you have to be aware of and, be taking a look at.
Right. Yeah. Very good. So, okay, let's talk about inflation right now. Obviously, you even mentioned it. It has been increasing here lately, been hitting retirees really hard. So if inflation rates would come down, we already know prices aren't going to go back to where they were. Dang it. I wish. I remember, back when I was a kid, I could get, penny candy. That's not happening anymore. Candy bars were a dime, no more.
Yeah.
Not going to happen. But so let's talk about how retirees can create those income streams that are going to keep pace with rising costs rather than, falling further back each year.
Yeah, no, it's super important. One of the biggest things that people can do is if you're the average person, so I'm basically taking out like military and federal employees here because they're a bit of an exception to this rule. But for pretty much everybody else, you're going to have one inflation adjusted income source in retirement. Basically one source that every year increases, somewhat indexed to inflation.
Yeah.
And, that's Social Security.
Right.
So, if you're a federal employee, your pension does as well. If you're military, it does also. But for most other pensions, they're fixed. If you have types of annuity payments, those are generally fixed as well. But Social Security, every year, you have that cost of living adjustment. Now, I'm not going to make the claim that fully keeps up with inflation all of the time. Generally, it's probably going to lag a little bit behind. It's based on inflation, the CPI, but it's not always going to be right on. But it is going to be increasing. So if you're someone who was receiving $1,000 of Social Security benefits when they first filed 15 years ago, you're not going to be still receiving that same $1,000 today. You're going to be quite a lot more. Maybe not still quite enough if that's all you have with today's prices, but you're going to be having gotten those increases along the way. So I think when you claim there just becomes increasingly important because, if you know anything about compounding, it's good to have a little bit more time of that compounding interest. So people don't necessarily think of Social Security as like compounding interest, but it is growing by, between 62 and 67, roughly it scales up, but around 6% a year. And then, around 8% after between 67 and 70. So that's pretty decent growth that is then also going to get those cost of living adjustments.
Yeah.
So when you file, building up a bigger base of that Social Security, I think is really important to kind of help shield a little bit against inflation because it really is going to be your best friend in 20 years that you've been getting those cost of living adjustments if those continue to come in the same way that they have been.
Yeah.
Another thing, I think just tax efficiency with your withdrawal strategy. So a lot of times what people don't think about is gross withdrawal versus net withdrawal. You think about it with your paycheck, but you don't always think about it when you're talking about retirement account withdrawals. I was talking to a client a couple days ago, and we were talking about a withdrawal strategy to set up kind of really just another source of income from their portfolio. And they were saying, okay, well, how much can we take? And we kind of figured a certain number. And they were like, oh, well, the guy, I believe he was an engineer. And he was like, I'd kind of figured about $1,000 more than that a month. And I was like, well, you're right about that. On a gross number, that's what I would recommend. But after we withheld for federal and state, this is really what you're going to be receiving. So, if you wanted to take, let's say, $3,000 a month off your investments, and that's what you wanted to have and spend, and let's say that was 4% of your portfolio. If that's an IRA, in order to get that 3% or $3,000, you're going to have to pull more than $3,000, withhold federal and state,
Right.
Or you're not going to receive that full amount. And at that point, you're maybe taking too much of your portfolio. So it's just something to definitely consider is your withdrawal strategy. To try to keep those a bit lower if you are tax diversified, in the sense that you have Roth money, you have pre-tax money, you have after-tax, you have HSA. It's good to try to coordinate those to get you the most net income relative to your gross income that you can have. So you're not having to take, a lot more and putting more strain on your portfolio, and that amount is just going out to the IRS. You're never seeing that. So I think that's important. And then, you kind of mentioned this actually, Luann, I think during the last question. It's important not to just get to retirement and think, okay, I'm not going to be investing anymore.
Yeah.
I'm retired. I'm, spending this money now. I can't afford to lose any of it. There is certainly some truth to the fact, a lot of truth to the fact that if you're early on retirement, you have a long life expectancy. Yeah, you don't want to take a huge hit on your investments day one. That's, not going to be the best for the longevity of your retirement. However, on the flip side of that, if you're retiring young, if you have a long time horizon, even if you're retiring a bit older, but you are going to have a fairly long life expectancy, you're going to need that money to be around for a long time. So it's really a matter at that point of saying, how do I create, some people call it a bucket strategy. Some people call it like kind of segmenting accounts, where I know, maybe I have some safer sources that I say, this is where I'm going to get my income from early on. And then I have some more aggressive sources that say, this is going to be longer term money. There's a term that I bring up a lot because I think that, in my opinion, it's one of the more relevant, financial, I'm forgetting the word right now, but not financial therapy, but like behavioral finance.
Oh, yeah.
Terms.
Sure.
Which is, mental accounting, which is when people kind of look at different accounts and they look at them as, totally different and think, okay, well, I have to do the same thing on all of these different accounts because these are, all separate. Where in reality, your portfolio is your portfolio. So as long as you're staying in your risk tolerance overall, you're staying in, a safe space, you don't necessarily have to invest the same way in every type of account and every pot and pool of money that you have. It's actually much better to kind of tailor that to what the goal of the money is. You really want to look at, goal and time horizon. So when we're talking about, say, like a Roth IRA, for example, there's a lot of people that, because the Roth IRA didn't even really hit the scene until much later in their life, might have, $500,000, $1 million in a 401k and, $80,000 in a Roth IRA. That Roth IRA is a really small portion of your overall funds, and you're probably not going to draw from it super early into retirement, most likely. And so, you could look at that account as having a longer time horizon than your, your 401k maybe. That's all pre-tax that you're going to be pulling from a little bit sooner. So I think there's different ways to look at that, but the general message is you don't necessarily need to think, okay, I'm retiring. I'm not going to chase any return anymore. I just want to be totally safe and not lose anything.
Yeah, you have to make it work for you. You have to make it work a little. Like you said, grow some money, but keep some safe. Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk about some mistakes that you've seen people make when it comes to claiming their Social Security benefits, because it's so important to get that right, because, that's going to be, a bedrock of your retirement income, probably.
Yeah, it really is. And Social Security it's one of the most, I think it's one of the, maybe outside of taxes, the most confusing part of retirement, especially when you get into, nuances and benefits. Yeah, I think I'm pretty good on, general Social Security knowledge. There's a lot of questions that I can't answer, but it's one of those things that every now and then I will still get a question that I'm like, I'm going to have to look into that one for you. I have an idea of how that's probably going to go. And usually it has something to do with taxes as it relates to Social Security as well. But one of just the most common mistakes that we see is people still working. So, maybe let's just say you're 67, so you don't have that earnings test anymore, because that's the most common thing. And you're still working and you're like, I'm just going to go ahead and collect. I don't know how long I'm going to live for. I can invest that extra money, or I can spend it on this, that, or the other. Usually that's not a great idea for a couple reasons. For one reason, you're giving up a good bit of growth on your Social Security. Once you've hit 67, it's grown like 8% a year plus COLA. You could be double digits in growth easily, over those couple of years. And then two, you're going to be adding a lot to your taxable income at that point. So, if you're making a good salary, still working, 85% of that Social Security is going to get subject to tax, and it's not going to be growing anymore. So, I think people really need to think about that. And also, if you're married, if you're the higher income earner, you're kind of penalizing your spouse too, because if something happens to you, that amount that you're collecting is the amount they're going to get.
Right.
So if you take your benefits at 67 and die at 68, they're not going to be able to delay to your, age 70 and get what would have been your original amount. They're going to be capped out at the amount you received when you started collecting. So again, I think it's really important to think about all of those factors when you're looking at Social Security. And then this is a slightly rarer problem, but I've seen it before. And I would say from a dollars perspective, it's probably, the biggest mistake, like just from a scale perspective, which is just not knowing about what benefits are afforded to you. If you're someone with minor children or you've adopted grandkids, if you're someone with a child with special needs, if you have a spouse with a child in care, if you're divorced, if you have a divorced spouse that's passed away, there's so many different little other types of collection strategies that can apply to people sometimes. If you're someone that, all your kids are grown, you've only ever been married once, and none of your kids have any special needs, Social Security is really going to be a decision of like 67 versus 70. And there might be 62 versus 67 versus 70. And there might be some spousal benefits in there. But other than that, there's not going to be all these other nuanced things, most likely. But for some people, we've seen where, hey, you could have been collecting that benefit for 10 years and you just didn't know about it. And Social Security is not going to tell you if you don't know about it. So it's important to know the benefits that are afforded to you, because that can cost, it really, in my opinion, kind of is a cost, because it's like, hey, maybe that would have been $500 a month or $1,000 a month that could have been coming in for the last 10 years that wasn't.
Hey, Graham, I'm wondering, can you give us an overview of how Social Security gets taxed, and then also the strategies that can actually work to help us keep more of our benefits, those benefits, in our pocket?
Yeah, the taxation for Social Security is definitely a bit confusing, because, there's been more discussion over the last year, obviously, as there was, some proposals to maybe eliminate tax on Social Security that didn't end up making it into the OBBB bill that passed not too long ago. But Social Security on its own. So if you're someone who just has Social Security, and that's the only source of income that you have, and you're not taking any other withdrawals, don't have any other income at all, it's going to be fully non-taxable. So, in a sense, Social Security kind of is not taxed if you just have Social Security.
Right.
Social Security taxation really depends on the other income that you have. So it's not based on the Social Security alone, but it's really more based on, do you have pensions? Are you taking withdrawals? So the first threshold, I'll just kind of give the married couple ones.
Okay.
The thresholds for if it's taxed at all is around $32,000 modified adjusted gross income up to $44,000 modified adjusted gross income. So at $32,000, if you're above that limit, you're at that 50% threshold. So, if you have, let's say 10,000 in Social Security, or probably 20,000, then 10,000 of that will be added on to be taxed for income taxes. And if you're above the 44 modified adjusted gross income, then 85% of that, 20,000 is going to get added. So it's really dependent on your other income. So for people who are still working in collect, like I mentioned earlier, it is very common that they will see, that full 85% tax rate hit their Social Security. Same with people with big pensions. I mean, if you're like a CSRS government employee, which for people unfamiliar, really say old school government employee, you got a big pension. I've seen some NASA employees with big pensions, some Army people with big pensions.
Oh, yeah.
So for any of those people, blessing, you got a big pension, but your Social Security is pretty much going to 85% be subject to tax most of the time. So I think that is why, like we've said a bunch of times, delaying can be a really good tool to use while you're doing other things, like potentially, Roth converting, for example. If you're retired at 65 and you have a lot of pre-tax money built up, over time through RMDs, through regular withdrawals, that taxable income is going to pile on. It's going to affect your modified adjusted gross income, which is going to affect your Social Security taxation. So you might say, hey, why don't I take 3 or 5 years and start doing some conversions, ideally lessen my lifetime taxable income on a year-to-year basis. And then when I get to the end of that, maybe my Social Security will stay in that 50% limit, or maybe it'll even stay in the zero at that point. We've said this before, but there's a handful of people that we've seen that just have Social Security, and they're actually, eligible to do a certain amount to a Roth conversion. It depends on your other income sources, interest, and everything. That can actually be completely tax-free. Federal tax, and then sometimes even state with some new laws they passed in Alabama. So, that's a good thing to look at too. Now, if you have like $3 million in an IRA, you're probably the whatever 15 or 20K that you can usually do in that 0% bracket is really not going to do you much good. But for, the average person, if you got a couple $100,000 in an IRA, there's a chance over a couple year period of doing that, you could even get a significant portion of that out, pretty much income tax free. So there's a lot of different strategies. That's what we go over in our RITE process, RITE, retirement income, investments, taxes, and estate planning. We've gone over a lot today. Mm-hmm. If any of this is stuff that you have questions about, that you want to come in and talk to a professional about, we have 5 certified financial planners on staff. You can give us a call at 256-937-2010. Again, that number is 256-937-2010. I hope everybody has an awesome and blessed week. And remember to serve every person in every situation with a servant heart.
Are questions about your financial future, such as, have I saved enough? Or will my retirement last? Keeping you up at night? Text VISIT to 256-937-2010. That's text VISIT to 256-937-2010 and schedule your consultation today.
Graham Bauer holds the enrolled agent designation, but is not currently offering tax preparation services. Neither the firm nor its agents may give tax advice. Individuals should consult with a qualified professional for guidance before making any purchasing decisions.
Investment advisory services made available through AE Wealth Management LLC, AEWM. AEWM and WG Financial Group are not affiliated companies. Insurance products are offered through the insurance business WG Insurance Services. WG Financial Group is an investment advisory practice that offers products and services through AE Wealth Management LLC, AEWM, a registered investment advisor. AEWM does not offer insurance products. The insurance products offered by WG Insurance Services are not subject to investment advisory requirements. AEWM and WG Financial Group are not affiliated companies. companies. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This radio show is intended for informational purposes only and is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual situation. WG Financial is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. Information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by WG Financial. This radio show is a paid placement.